I mean, it's a
Well,
quick presentation.
once you do, like, once we switch it up, then you can switch it back to me, and then
Okay.
I'll make sure and I'll monitor it.
And I'll probably
Again,
I'll hold the chat till after. But.
Okay, perfect. Well, yeah, so again, thank you so much for everybody joining. As always, it's really appreciate everybody taking the time and joining another one of our sessions. Today, this is with Aimee, so I'm going to let Aimee kind of definitely introduce herself and tell you, but she is one of the Code on the Beach alums. She did actually have a chance to keynote with us in 2019. I think she's actually wearing the shirt, which was pretty awesome. Thank you very much, Aimee. That's fantastic to represent. I really appreciate it. But yeah, she has a fascinating story. I'm really excited for you guys to spend some time with her. So she is going to do a little bit of a presentation, and then we'll actually do a little bit more of a roundtable, encourage a lot of questions, because she has gone through all the stuff that a lot of you guys are actually going through now. And it's really kind of a fascinating talk, because I think as we're all in the pandemic as well right now, it's really good for us to just stay connected and, you know, stay in touch. So anyway, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Aimee.
Okay.
You are now the host.
Okay, let me, oh, it says that there we go.
You're on there now. There you go.
Okay, there we go. Yeah, so this, these are some slides that I put together, and I figured, you know, most of what we're going to do today should be like a little bit more personal roundtable. And I feel like I've done presentations in the past, and I think they're really beneficial and valuable when they can be a little bit more interactive than me just doing a presentation. So this is just going to be like a little like 10, 15 minute presentation. Just kind of a keynote that I've given to get started, and then definitely open up to more discussion. But yeah, so let me, I have slides on both screens here. So yeah, if people may or may not know who I am, I spent about 16 years of my life as a professional figure skater before trying a couple of various things and then landing into software development. And so these are just some kind of like life lessons I learned in sports that I think apply to software engineering. Right now, I'm making the transition into DevOps. And so I'm kind of right there along with y'all in stepping way outside my comfort zone and trying a lot of new things. And I went to the Nashville Software School, which is in Nashville, and it was a 6-month boot camp. This was 6 years ago. We did 3 months of JavaScript, which included Node, and then we did Ruby on Rails on the back end. So I spent most of my career after that in full stack, also focused a good bit in front end. I've worked for Warner Brothers, NPM, Tufts and Needle, which is how I kind of met Pete. And now I'm at CBS. I'm also a Google developer expert. It used to be just a general expertise in web technologies, but I'm specializing in performance now. So definitely, like when we do the roundtable, feel free to hit me up on performance type questions or like CSS deep dive questions, browser internal, stuff like that. I do a podcast every week called JavaScript Jabber. Do a lot of weightlifting, running, biking. I have 2 cats, drink a lot of tea and kombucha. So there's some little fun facts. I'm not sure what happened to the slides here. There we go. So like I said, from the age of 5 to 18, I was a professional figure skater. And I think it's the time that I spent growing up on the ice are really like the life lessons that have led me to be successful in my career. So when people find out that I used to be a professional figure skater, they always ask me the same 3 questions. Can you do a triple axel? And how do you not get dizzy doing all those spins? 2 questions, not 3, sorry. The answer to the first question is pretty easy. No, but I can do a double axel. And then there's a second question. How do you not get dizzy? So when you're on the ice, we're spinning at more than 300 revolutions a minute. That's kind of a lot. That's the same amount of centrifugal force that they use to train astronauts. I don't know if most people knew that. I didn't know that actually either until I did a little bit of research. So there's something called the Vomit Comet, actually. It's a simulator that they use at NASA to prepare astronauts before going up into space. But if you look on YouTube, you'll see lots of big, tough pilots just like getting sick. However, if you go to a competition for figure skating any weekend, you'll see probably, 12, 19-year-olds spinning at least that fast and not getting sick ever. So how do we not get dizzy? Let's go with the easy parts first. Practice. Repetition creates muscle memory. And in my case, I'm talking about lots and lots of repetitions, practicing morning, noon, and night for hours every year, weekends, early mornings, 4:30 a.m., sometimes even cases of like 3:30 in the morning, kind of whenever you could get ice. And actually missing out on a lot of childhood rites of passage. So not going to prom, not doing all those kinds of normal things because I was so devoted to this. And lots of falls, failing over and over again, sprains, breaks. I broke my tailbone when I was 16. That was pretty painful. So the number one lesson is suck it up, buttercup. This is something that my coach used to tell me over and over again. And if there's one thing being a professional athlete teaches you, it's how to lose. And you're going to lose a lot. You're going to fall over and over again, fail constantly. But I think it's honestly in programming. So like take a step back from my slides here for a second. I was, when I first started my programming journey, I was really fearful that I wasn't smart enough. I was not the kind of person that was raised around computers. Neither of my parents had technical backgrounds. And I was just terrified that I was going to like be exposed as not being smart enough and all these kinds of things. But I think one of the biggest reasons I've been successful in my career is just kind of letting go of that fear of failure and just not worrying about it. Because if I hadn't have stepped out of my comfort zone, there's no way I would have been successful in the ways that I have been. So the goal, obviously, though, is to win more than you lose. And if you think success means winning every single time, you're going to be in for a lifetime of disappointment. Like I was saying, you're probably going to lose a lot more than you're going to win at first. So the first thing, an example of losing and deleting the production database. This has kind of become a rite of passage in tech. So definitely want to avoid doing it if you can, but I will admit that yes, even I have done this. Yep, and thank God for backups. I had to go to our IT department and they did, I think, daily backups and restore from a backup. So the point is, though, I learned and I lived on from that, and I continued on my journey. So you do it to show maybe the people that doubt you in life, your resilience, but more importantly, to remind yourself that the moments of your biggest defeats are often the seeds of your biggest triumph in life. I love being an engineer. And this, all of the things that I've accomplished, like I said, was born out of stepping outside my comfort zone. Kind of my journey into programming, I was working for a marketing company. It was an advertising agency, and we had 2 programmers, and they were usually so backed up with work that they were unable to complete kind of just like the in-house stuff that needed to be done for our website. And I was the project manager there, and I think I had asked probably a good, I don't know, almost for close to a year to do some updates to our site, and they had yet to have them done. So I went home one night and I thought, I'm just going to figure out how to do this myself, even though I obviously was terrified, didn't know what I was doing, but just through a process of, looking on YouTube and learning from there, I was able to kind of start getting some footing. So like I said, for weeks, once I started to, step into programming, I would stay up usually past, really late hours in the night to try to kind of tweak the site while I thought that nobody really would be using it because it's a very low traffic site, obviously, and started playing around with CSS and stuff like that. And in doing that, I just got addicted over time. I got obsessed with it, which was absolutely fantastic because I was, you know, stepping outside my comfort zone, stepping into a career that was very much just not something that people probably would have imagined for myself. Definitely not something that my parents would have, you know, introduced me to, not something that I would have been introduced to in the schools that I had gone to. Yeah. So now this is one of my favorite sayings. I was definitely getting comfortable being uncomfortable. I was making the most of the situation I was in. You know, marketing was not the most lucrative career, but I was using it as a way to help start exposing me to programming and tech. So lesson 2, push sideways to move forward. I know many of you probably go to the ice rink, maybe around Christmas time or something, but when you're going, you're probably hugging the wall around you. So the point is there though, when the road directly ahead of you is blocked, broken, or just makes no sense, you push sideways. We're thinking about like pushing sideways on the wall when you're, you know, getting out on the ice to try to skate, and eventually you're gonna make progress. Lesson number 3 is to be coachable. I would say that programming can be a very humbling career to enter into. And you have to be willing to not only listen to what you're being told, to you know, be able to truly hear it. I know for me, if you have a relationship with mentors or people that you trust and admire, I think trust is a big key word there. If you trust them, I would definitely encourage you to not be afraid to seek feedback. That feedback may be uncomfortable and, you know, not necessarily always great in what you want to hear, but it's definitely going to make you better over time. One thing that my coach always told me is to control the controllable. So one thing I see a lot of newer programmers struggle with, and definitely something I struggled with, is when we're working on a feature and it gets kind of complex, we kind of get stuck in our head and our mental energy is taken away from the problem at hand, and we start questioning, you know, am I smart enough? Why are these other people around me, you know, better than me, or all these things? But a lot of those things are out of your control. And just have a good attitude in general. So I like this quote, we can complain because we have, because rose bushes have thorns, or rejoice because the bushes have roses. Lesson number 3.5, be willing to coach others. If you're, you know, kind of further along in your journey, definitely pass on the information that you have to others. I think being able to mentor, even if somebody is, you know, only a couple steps behind you, being able to mentor is going to help solidify the concepts in your head. Tell your story too, especially if you come from a non-traditional background. You just don't look like everybody else in the field. I know for me, I was the only woman in my boot camp, but, you know, use those things to your advantage. There's something in psychology called the Rosenthal Effect, which again, just getting back to, you know, focusing on the right things. And that Rosenthal Effect basically says that in life, we get what we expect. So people in this industry definitely come in all shapes, sizes, genders, colors, orientations, all different kinds of financial backgrounds. I know that when I got into programming, I definitely had this vision in my head of like, I totally, you know, didn't fit in. I was not a big Star Wars nerd, but I think there's room for everybody. Keep in mind that not everyone had the same advantages growing up. There is a video that I really like on YouTube. If you go to my website, you can check it out. But, you know, depending on, you know, what your background was growing up. I was not super technical, you know, growing up. I didn't grow up in a home with a computer. Don't let that hold you back. Lesson number 4, turn your negatives into positives. So a good analogy here, biomechanically, what women lack in strength, we can make up for in flexibility with skating. So there's something called the layback in figure skating, where you lean all the way back with your shoulders and head super low like this. But you'll be hard pressed to find any male figure skater doing this. So my point is pick moves that suit you. When you're less experienced, acknowledge it and ask others to share their experience with you. So being new comes with a lot of advantages, actually. More often than not, as you advance in your career, people are going to turn to you to ask questions, and you're not going to be able to, seize the opportunity of being new to ask a lot of questions and just be like overly curious. I might have gone back a slide, but I feel like I just said this, turn your negatives into positives. If you don't look like everyone else, I would say don't worry about blending into the woodwork. I would say use it as an opportunity to stand out. And after all these 4 steps, let's go on to lesson number 5, which is to stay in the moment. This is really, really, really important in programming as far as keeping focused on the right things and handling your mental energy wisely. So this is a good quote. Yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, today is a gift. That is why it's called the present. There's no difference between preparing for a skating competition or a technical programming interview, although the wardrobe choices probably are not the same. With both challenges, you'll have to find a way to push all that self-doubt outside of your head and just focus on the task at hand. You have to figure out to stay in the moment as well for the big picture of your career. Programming is very iterative. So it's a lot like programming. We write a little bit of code, we test it, we write a little bit of code, test it, whether you're writing code or debugging something or building your career. It's the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, short-term goals where the actual work gets done and where the momentum towards long-term goal is created. So at the beginning of this talk, I told you that the question I most frequently asked is, how do you not get dizzy when you do all the spins? The short answer is practice. Here's the more complicated answer. In most sports where you flip and turn, you're taught to keep your eyes focused on a fixed point. In skating, you're taught simply to keep your eyes horizontal so that your view only spins around a single axis. And you can't always prevent yourself from feeling dizzy or confused, but you can commit to casting out fear and stepping outside your comfort zone every day. That's it for my little short presentation, and hopefully that was a good little warm up to open it up to more questions. And I will turn it back over to you.
Awesome, Aimee, thank you.
Oh, there's somebody I need to admit. Okay, I've just admitted them. And okay. Let's see. Okay, you should be host now.
Okay, awesome. Well, cool, yeah, so again, thank you so much for talking to us. I do want this to be a roundtable. I do encourage everybody to ask as many questions as possible. But I will go ahead and kind of get it started too. So, because I have a ton of questions for you, Aimee.
Good. And I will say I mentor with a local boot camp here, and I'm literally in the process of mentoring someone that graduates in 2 weeks and have been working with them almost daily. So although I graduated 6 months ago, I am very much in the state of being new right now.
Awesome. So I guess, so talk to me about what it was like for you to, Nashville Software School is very, very well respected. You know, what was it like to, be involved with that and to attend it?
So the program was 6 months, which is probably a little bit different than some of them that I went to, but nonetheless, it was still very intense. I think what was true then is still true today. To an extent, you're gonna get out what you put into it. It's a very delicate balance depending on your personality. If you are naturally very driven, you could reach a point of diminishing returns, and you have to learn when to step away. That said, not everybody operates that way. Some people work really well, under pressure at the last minute. So that kind of goes, I kind of mentioned that into the talk, which was learn what works best for you and try to focus on it that way. Using your classmates, make sure that I see this with people I mentor. It can be a little bit hard where you want to be like competitive with your classmates, but I would say as much as you can, try to think of them more as peers, because at some point y'all will all eventually like enter the job market together, and that can be a strong network for you in the future. I know I still keep in touch with people that I graduated with. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, that's awesome. So I know you graduated 6 years ago. How do you think that they've evolved? Or what have you seen in the market?
So definitely there's just been evolution in like the programs that they're offering. I know you can like specialize now in UX, data science. That said, even if you're just doing like a traditional path, like front end and back end, I think there's still plenty of room to, if you're doing like a final capstone project, focused on data science if you want. If you feel like when you graduate, you might want to go more into front end, then push yourself in the UX area. But like evolution of the program and stuff like that, I'm trying to think. Probably just the curriculum.
Right.
Obviously, like this kind of stuff, it's always changing. And one thing that I didn't touch on in the talk that I think is really valuable for newer programmers is just because you are new to a company doesn't mean that you can't offer immediate value. And that's one thing that you'll want to like sell people on when you're interviewing, is your ability to offer immediate value to them. And you can offer immediate value to them like if you have learned React. I think a lot of companies probably are still using classes and they're not using hooks and stuff like that. So that's something as a newer programmer that you could definitely have the ability to, if you didn't do it in your bootcamp, teach yourself and help them evolve their code base into a more modern version of React. Maybe get rid of Redux so that you can use hooks and stuff like that.
Got it. So when you graduated, how soon did you find a job? And then between finding a job and working in programming, what did you do to kind of keep your skill set up?
So, yeah, and I will say this too, because this is like the direct advice I'm giving the person I'm mentoring. There is a lot of not great news out there about the job market.
A little bit.
And I would say, because I am the kind of person, like I talked about it multiple times, about using your mental energy wisely. There, to a large extent, that is outside of your control. And I would say, if you go in with the expectation that, and it goes back to that Rosenthal effect, that you're going to get what you believe. If you go into it thinking that you're not going to get a job for 6 months or a year or 3 months, I would say try your best to not.
Aimee, you froze.
1 week.
There you go.
Just start each day as a new day. As far as like setting goals for yourself, set goals on as short a time cadence as possible. So maybe like a weekly goal or something like that. Job market. So for me, my situation was, and I just got to notice that my connection was a little bit unstable, but I should be good in a little bit. Sometimes it goes in and out, so hopefully it's okay.
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, sorry about that. I pay for like extra high speed, so hopefully it'll be good. But for me, while I did not graduate in a pandemic, I did go to a boot camp in Nashville, and I knew for a fact that I would be relocating to Baltimore when I graduated. So networking for me was a little bit tricky. And the way that I went about it is by, I literally just gave this advice to the person I'm mentoring this morning. I said, do not, submit your resume through traditional means. If you are submitting a resume, try to go online and try to find a direct email address and try to contact that person. Try to look through, see if you can find somebody's GitHub, see if you can find their Twitter, see if you can find their website. Try to find a direct email address. and contact someone that way. See if you can find like a friend of a friend, stuff like that. So for me, I started interviewing while I was in the boot camp, and this is a good story too of like persistence and not to get discouraged if you don't hear back right away. So I had my heart set on a full stack JavaScript position, which 6 years ago was kind of like non-existent. There are not a lot of people doing Node in production. So I just saw somebody ask a question. I did have an undergrad degree. I did not have it was just in communications. So nothing technical. But back to what I was saying. So I think 3 months in, so halfway point of the boot camp that I was in, I was put in touch via Twitter of a hiring manager at this company that was hiring a full stack JavaScript developer. And I had my phone screen with him. I was not prepared for a technical phone screen. I guess I did do okay. But he said, you know, we really only have openings for mid and senior, which is exactly the case for everything out there right now, pretty much. So which is why I'm telling the story. And he said, he was like, we'll see if we could do like an internship or something, you know, hit me up, you know, closer to graduation. So I messaged him then maybe like another month in, and he said, well, you know, we still haven't been able to fill the mid or senior role. He said, let me at least just give you like an HR interview to see if you can pass that. So I did the HR interview, responded back to him when I got the feedback from the HR interview that it went well, didn't hear from him for like a week, emailed again, didn't hear again, emailed a second time, and he was like, well, we can't fly you here because, you know, this is like a mid-senior position and you're not. But he's like, let me know when you get to Baltimore, we'll meet with you. So let him know when I got to Baltimore, met with him, did the interview, 4-hour technical interview, bombed it. Like I'm embarrassed at the way I answered some of the questions. But he called me and he said, the team like loved your passion and we want to bring you on. So I say that because like the advice I give to juniors is most of the time people are going to be making a bet on you. And what you can do is sell them on your enthusiasm. Try to find ways that you can be immediately valuable. So for me, when I graduated, JavaScript 2015 was just coming out. A lot of people weren't using that. So that was a way that I was able to provide immediate value to the companies by helping them to modernize their code base. Something very doable for a newer developer.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, so what I can do now, I mean, is just open this up like to everybody. If
don't be afraid, like ask anything and everything, technical, mentoring, like, literally doesn't matter.
Yeah, so I'll open it up. I mean, yeah, if you got questions, unmute yourself, definitely ask, or you can do it in chat and then we can respond however best to do that. Does anybody have anything?
I got a question. So, okay, one of the things that's kind of made me more or less scared, I guess you could say, is I've noticed just in normal work life, you know, I'll start a job in any field. And, you know, on that first day, week, month, you may not know exactly the ins and outs of it. So right now we're learning, you know, we're learning React, we're learning all these, again, technologies, front-end technologies, whatever. How do you go into a job kind of like with that confidence of like, hey, I want to work here, but you don't actually know what they do yet?
So there's a lot of parts to that question. One of the things that I struggled with as a junior was learning something, and I just got the notice that my internet is being flaky again. It's been fine for weeks, and of course it's being weird now, so bear with me. But so one of the things that I really struggled with was learning a highly technical domain, which is really just, I mean, what does the business do? So when I worked for Tuft & Needle, we sold mattresses. That domain is not super hard to wrap your head around. and I'll get specifically to like why I'm saying this in my answer in a minute. But so the first company I worked for, we handled email infrastructure. That domain is very complex. There's a lot to learn about how email works under the hood in order to be able to work on that system. I worked at a place called Built Technologies, which is in fintech, and understanding the loan management process was pretty complex. So one thing to do is not just learn the technical skills like React or whatever their backend is, but to also spend time, and you could, I would say your product managers at your job are going to help you the best with this, or maybe even a UX person, is to spend a bit of time also learning the domain. That would be a good thing to ask in the interviews. Do some research before your interviews to understand the domain and ask them, you know, what are the challenges around managing this domain? But that's something that you can level up in regardless of your programming, how far along you are in your programming journey. One thing that also tripped me up a lot was just the size of the code base. I'd never seen an actual production code base when I'd worked at the boot camp. So I would say, see if there are ways to contribute to open source projects, or even poke around an open source project like React or something like that. I think there are like a lot of blog posts out there about React internals, so that you can start to expose yourself to the complexity of just a really, really, really large code base. Another thing, like I was saying at the very beginning, is this is something that I think newer developers get tripped up on a lot, is just understanding like the deployment process. There's a lot of different like tools that people use, and more than likely whatever company you go to is going to use like a very bespoke process, and it's not going to translate, but it's probably going to be much more complicated than something like I think it's like Verkle now, if I'm pronouncing that right, probably not, Zeit now, Heroku. Is probably going to be a lot more complex than that. So that's what I was like saying when we were getting started. Spend a little bit of time like digging into basic networking in GCP or Azure. You might spend a little bit of time learning something called the OSI model, which is probably pretty complex. You don't need to know it by heart, but at least expose yourself to some of this kind of stuff. Expose yourself to like how the internet works. How does BGP routing work? These are like all kinds of things that will like really, really set you apart and help you debug when things go wrong. Does that help answer your?
Well, I think you froze again, but yes, it does.
Okay.
And Aimee, we do have a question from Thomas. Do you think going to school or a boot camp is necessary to acquire the skills and knowledge of becoming a coder?
It's not. I don't think so. When I was at Tuft & Needle, we hired somebody. It was his second job, but he was completely self-taught via Free Code Camp, and he was one of the best engineers I've ever worked with. Very young in his career, but one of the best. And I think what made him the best is he had just like this internal curiosity. He was, one thing that he did, kind of tangential to what we're talking about, but he was really, really good in asking questions, especially, you know, at Tuft & Needle, we were 100% remote, and it can be hard as a newer developer to get your footing remote. So one thing that I saw him do that was just phenomenal for people that were more senior and very busy is he would, you know, read the stack trace, and he, based on the stack trace that he was getting for an error, he would say, I think this is what's happening. Here's what I've tried. A lot of times when he would do this, his Slack posts were like almost, you know, a couple paragraphs long. But it gave so much context into what was going on that it was really, really valuable. So all that to say, it's not at all. That said, though, I mean, there are a lot of advantages to school or boot camp, depending on your learning style. If you're extremely like self-motivated, have a high degree of discipline, then maybe you don't. But if that's not like one of your strong suits, then just kind of the structure of a traditional program is probably really helpful.
I have a question. I was actually speaking to an individual that went through Nashua Software School as well, and then now she works for Smile Direct Club, and she's up in Nashville, and she was saying that the challenge that she has now as a junior developer is that everyone's remote. And now that we're all working remote, I'm very curious to see your tips on that, because I don't know when we're all getting back into the work, in our office space. And so I can see that as a really big challenge for a remote developer, anyone really for that matter.
Yeah. So there is one good thing about the state of things right now and being remote, and that is that everyone's remote. I like say this because I think it's a big mistake that I made early in my career. In my second job, I joined a team remotely, but I was the only remote engineer. And it was not intentional by any means, but just because I was the only remote one meant that it was really easy to have like these internal kind of like water cooler discussions that provide a lot of context, especially when you're new, that I would miss out on like over and over and over again. And it made things really difficult. So like the good thing is that most of the time, like right now, everybody's probably remote. But things that have helped me be successful remotely, obviously pairing. I think, if you can work at a place where they're like a core set of hours, so everybody's online at the same time. Trying to think what else. I think the FaceTime with your coworkers is important. Maybe it's just me. This is probably not the case for everyone, but I have a tendency, especially at the beginning, like I would doubt myself, and being able to see people's nonverbal communication of like, hey, I'm doing a good job, or something like that. If you have one-on-ones with your manager, make sure you come to those prepared with questions about, where you can improve. Man, I wish I had better advice as far as being remote. I'm trying to think. Learn like what time.
More like as a junior, right? Like because you have to have mentors specifically if you are going to be asked certain things. So I'm just kind of curious, because entering the workforce as a junior engineer, right?
Yeah, pairing is huge. Like still now, because I'm like venturing into DevOps, I'm asking if I can pair with folks. I would say if you can, in the heat of the moment is probably not a good thing, but if there are on-call rotations, see if you can, because that's going to help you like get a really good breadth of knowledge pretty quickly, is to see if you can somehow participate in the on-call rotations somehow. Again, like you don't want to jump into something in the heat of a moment when production is going down. But once things have settled, see if you can talk through it. I would say like one of the biggest ways that I was able to get, to mid sooner rather than later was by putting in a lot of extra hours. So that's like maybe unpopular opinion for some folks, but I most definitely worked way more than the traditional 40 hours. During the week, I would usually like start work an hour early, end an hour late, not typically take lunch, like eat lunch at my desk, treated Saturday like a normal work day. So again, like someone's banging on a wall, I'm sorry. I think my neighbor must be nailing something. But yeah, just like the hours. I say that because if you can look at every single PR review, you might not be required to do that. There might already be a PR that is approved, but if you can look at it, see if, don't just hand over a PR, or don't just let somebody hand over a PR for you. Go through the change set with them on a phone call. I think it's like called a peer review typically. Those are really valuable. So overarching theme, lots of pairing.
That's awesome. That's great. What was like your biggest, when you start talking about challenges in entering the workforce and growing into a mid, and now you're a senior, what do you think has been like your biggest challenge to like overcome?
That's a lot. And I mean, like the person I'm mentoring, they ask me this a lot, like, they'll inevitably doubt yourself. Like, why am I not doing this faster? Why are the people around me faster? And I would say you have to really get good at knowing like what your threshold is, because you will reach diminishing returns at a certain point if you do too much. But I make the analogy of lifting, and when I was like 15, my lifting coach had me get on the squat rack, and he was like, put more weight than I was used to, and he was like, I want you to do 20. And I was like, 20? I only usually do 15, and you added more weight. And so I did my 20, and he's like, keep going, 10 more. And then I did my 10 more, and he said, keep going, do another 10. And I think I like got to close to 100, and I was like, holy smokes. And he was like, see, you can do way more than you think you can. So I say that because like we're all adults here, and some people have not liked this advice that I've given in the past, but it's just what's worked for me. Is I have like for at least the first 3 years of my career, like pushed to that threshold of like what is my breaking point, as long and as consistently as possible.
That's good. That's good. So Nicholas asked us a question, twofold question. How well prepared did you feel toward the end of your boot camp and a few months into your first job? How did that match? And then how well prepared did you realize you were?
So again, like unpopular opinion, but it's the truth for me. So the boot camp was most definitely invaluable, and it most definitely sped up my learning process. But I think I came out of the boot camp thinking that I was pretty prepared. And I did not feel prepared at all once I got to the first job. I would say the first job was scarier than the boot camp by magnitudes. Your mileage will vary. My first job was at, like I said, the role was supposed to be for a mid or senior, and they couldn't find someone for that. So obviously there was a lot going on in that domain. It was the email infrastructure. I was doing full stack. I was working on like a multitude of APIs and something called an ETL, which stands for extract, transform, load. So it was like our node ETLs were interfacing with C code. So this was obviously like a very complex domain. I did not feel prepared, but that's where the advice of like literally just like steady progress forward without like letting up, and you will get there. I do not think I am like highly intelligent. I'm not like gifted. I'm a pretty average person who worked really hard. So don't be scared. Like, I think too, like, try to find the parts of programming that you love, so that when it gets hard and it gets discouraging, you can kind of like reacquaint yourself with why you're doing this, and like celebrate when something does go well, because especially at the beginning, you're going to hit way more roadblocks than you are successes. But I truly believe literally anyone can do this with the right amount of effort and practice. So does that help answer your question, Nicholas? Okay. Do not like, I cannot say it. And he said, yeah, like,
yeah,
it's
awesome.
I cannot stress it enough. I am nothing special. And I literally think anyone can do this, even in a pandemic. It might take you a little bit of time. Like, one plus side of the pandemic is that there's going to be a lot more need for technical people. So much more is going to be reliant on like technical systems now. Go on, shoot, I'm blanking on it. Maybe somebody can speak up in the chat, or maybe you know, Pete, but there is, it's not Crunchbase. It's something like Angel, I don't know. It's a website basically for start. Thank you.
Yeah, Angel
Yes.
List. Yeah.
So go on there and see who may or may not be hiring. Like a caveat, startups are, they're very bumpy. You might start and a month later you might hear that they're running out of runway, i.e. they don't know if they can make payroll. But as a newer developer, you're more likely to get your foot in the door there. But there's a lot of stuff around like telemedicine on Angel List right now. So go on there and check stuff out.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think that, yeah, there's certain industries that have definitely been impacted more than others. I mean, even on our side, we've definitely seen a rise in certain things. And again, there's industries that are still hiring, right? So that's a great kind of point, just kind of focus on that. But I agree with you too, that the smaller the company, right, or small, mid-sized startups, I do find that they're a little bit more, I would say, open to bringing in junior developers and mentoring them, whereas enterprise companies might not do it as much, right? Because what you were saying earlier, they typically like the mid to senior immediate impact, whereas some of the other ones, are a little bit more open to it.
Depending too on like your background, if you have like a military background, you might be able to kind of use what you've learned in your boot camp to go in like a cybersecurity route or DevOps, or you don't need the military background to necessarily get into DevOps. It does help for cybersecurity because of clearances and stuff like that. But there's a lot of like roles for entry level cybersecurity. And on a few occasions, I've seen ones for SRE, which is called Site Reliability Engineering. So like right now, try not to limit yourself to like full stack or front end. Also too, like, there's QA positions. There's like not just like a manual QA person, but QA engineering is another direction, or even product management. If you enjoy tech, but you're not sure if you want to write code day in and day out, there's that kind of stuff too.
Oh, that's good. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Oh, a face I know, or a name I know.
Yeah, Ryan.
Hey, what's up, Aimee?
Hello.
Hey, good to see you. Quick question about the mentoring. How did you get involved? Was this more NSS related, or kind of peers, or any direct reports that kind of came to you and asked for help? How did that kind of get started?
Do you mean at me becoming a mentor, or for me being a mentee? For me, both. For me, when I was getting started, I would say I only really ever had like one more traditional mentor. And that was just a matter of, I saw somebody on Twitter saying like they were looking to mentor someone, and I was in the right place at the right time. And I was like, me. It can be hard to get like real mentoring on a job. Your best way to get mentoring at work is going to be through like peer code reviews or pairing. But as far as getting a mentor, what happened more often than not in my career was, I would say, I had like a mentor that kind of like took me one step of the way, where like I had a set of specific questions at that point in time, and that person agreed to meet with me over the phone for 30 minutes or in person. And I asked them my questions, and then I didn't really talk to them much. We were acquaintances, but didn't have a formal thing set up. But it was just like a series of just people helping me along little by little. As far as me becoming a mentor, this was just a friend of mine that's going to a boot camp right now. And I saw how much like passion and drive they had, and thought like, I want to do what I can to help this person be successful.
So that's a good kind of lead in to Aimee, because I know that I remember your talk that you did at Code on the Beach, and then I think you did it also at Music City Tech, that year. So I got to see it twice. The one thing that you were talking about in that was your social media presence, and, you know, being uncomfortable even with that. So is there any kind of advice that you can give that? Because I mean, entering the workforce, yes, throwing your stuff on GitHub, that's tradition, but there's other things that you can do, because I know a lot of people look at that stuff from a
like I see more often than not that like people are afraid to ask questions. And I would say, like, as a newer developer, like I said in the little talk that I gave opening up to this, like, that is most definitely something to use to your advantage. I know as I got further along in my career, like more senior and architect level, there is nobody to ask questions really anymore. People are coming to you with questions. So if I had not like seized the opportunity early in my career to ask everything and anything, obviously you want to think through your questions and, you know, ask them in the most appropriate way possible, whether that be like batching them up or, you know, like I said about the person who went through free code camp and they were very thorough in their questions, but ask as many questions as possible. I know in the cohort that I was in, I was known as like the person who would ask all the time, tons of questions. Like, no, I did not hold back. And it's through and asking all those questions that you're like able to put more and more pieces together over time. So do that. That is such a thing that I think newer developers like don't take enough advantage of.
So did you get like, I mean, on Twitter, but then did you get involved with Stack Overflow? Did you get involved with other outlets at the time?
I didn't do Stack Overflow as much, and a good bit Twitter. I didn't ask as many questions on Twitter, a lot on Slack. I'm trying to think what other means. When I would meet somebody at a meetup, I would try to, you know, if it was appropriate, ask questions. I would usually like follow that person on Twitter and then, you know, remember that I could reach out to them in the future if I had a question. As far as like social media goes, I would say, I don't know necessarily why I have the following I do. I think it has a lot to do with the podcast that I'm a part of. But yeah, I mean, definitely, like, I would say don't be afraid to ask questions on Twitter. I know a lot of people that do that. You know, I think now, just because of like the state of things going on, that questions are not always as easy to ask in that realm. See if here's another thought I have. I'm part of like a couple different Facebook groups where it's like a little bit more of an intimate setting. You might be better off asking questions in that way. I don't know if, I'm actually not sure if everyone here is like in Jacksonville or just distributed, but like I know in Nashville, we have something called Nash Dev, which is like a Slack group for everyone in Nashville. And I know there's a lot of these different ones floating around in there. And most people are pretty receptive to, you know, helping out in there. If you're interested in DevOps, there's a Kubernetes Slack group. I can kind of rattle off a couple because this actually might be kind of helpful. If you're interested in SRE type stuff, there's a chaos engineering Slack group. What are some other ones that are good to join? There's one called We All JS. What other one? There's one called DevOps. I'm pretty confident that all these are like completely open to the public. So.
That's great. Was anybody ever, you know, have any other questions? We're all good.
I will say too, I might be slow to respond, but I'll drop my Twitter in here. My DMs are, is it Aimee underscore? I don't even know what my Twitter is. Hold on, let me look. This is so bad. It's either Aimee Knight or Aimee underscore Knight. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I don't know. It's Aimee underscore Knight. Anybody in here, free to pop me a question. And I might not be able to answer you immediately, but I'll get in touch with you.
Awesome.
Don't be
Thanks
discouraged.
again.
Like, seriously, I don't want people on this call to be discouraged. Do not be discouraged. It's going to get better. I think it's going to be good in the long run. I really, really do.
Agreed. Well, thank you so much, Aimee, for joining. As always, great to see you. And
You too.
Thanks again for everybody that hopped on. Again, it is recorded, so we'll push it out to our YouTube channel as well as our site. And then, Aimee, if you want to push it out as well. And if you want to do any of the slides, you can definitely send those over to me if you want me to distribute those.
Will do. Cool.
All right.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Well, thanks again, everybody. All right.
Bye.
See you soon.